Hi, everyone. Oh, it's so beautiful to see everyone here in this room. Such a privilege. Well, I want to make sure I'm conscious of time. We are showing this on Zoom. Unfortunately, we won't be able to see those questions when we open up for the Q&A. So for those that are logged into Zoom, please send your questions to uwtsafe@uw.edu. And that also includes folks in the room if you have questions afterwards, or because of time, we can't get to it. But so that's uwtsafe@uw.edu. So just introducing myself, my name is Susan Waxwell Golden, the Director of Emergency Preparedness and Campus Safety. And September is National Preparedness Month, and we start so late, but we thought we'd have a great opportunity to bring in our community partners to do a presentation on our actual city as well as the county and those kind of specific types of hazards that folks may not be experienced with or even know what to plan ahead. So I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Ariana, and here you go.
All right. Is this working? Yes. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Susan. So again, my name is Ariana Topier. I work for City of Tacoma Emergency Management. We are underneath Tacoma Fire Department. So a little bit of background with Tacoma Fire Department and who we serve. We serve Tacoma, obviously, but we also serve Fircrest and Fife. And so that leaves us a population of around 240,000 people. And so for City of Tacoma Emergency Management, we are a strong team of 3. And so it's my boss, who is the city manager for emergency management, Shantika Deogan, and then my colleague, Julie Winkler. And so about me, I do most of all the external communications. Julie does all the internal communications. And the reason why I'm in the corner, it's because I just had eye surgery, so the light doesn't do well with my eyes. So I'm like a vampire back in the corner. But anyways, so today I'm going to present on emergency preparedness, how to prepare for any types of emergencies, and just get those gears working, moving about what you should all think about for all different types of emergencies and disasters. So what is personal preparedness? Is basically being prepared for anything and anywhere you are. So that could be at home, while you're driving, at work, at school, doing groceries, So I'm going to teach you some ways and some things to think about when you are just walking wherever you are, because this is what I do every single day. I think of the worst every single moment of my life, which it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. They said they would do that. Okay, so why should you prepare? To ease your mind, to make you more relaxed, because when a disaster actually happens, if you haven't been in one, it could be very stressful. You're going to probably go in shock. You might not move as fast enough as you want to. So what I like to do, I like to teach people to always practice plans. Think of a scenario. Just think of one random disaster scenario, and then think of all the steps that you would do in that situation. So like we're going to talk about active shooters. If you hear there's an active shooter on campus, what is your first step? What do you think you're going to do? So going to alleviate anxiety? I mean, I have anxiety all the time, but it's going to reduce that anxiety. It's going to give you that peace of mind. If you have family, teaching your children about disasters and communications plans. So if you prepare your family, you're going to be more relaxed, knowing that your children know what to do. And before I get into this, if you have any questions on the way, just feel free to raise your hand. We don't have to wait until the end. I like interactive conversations. So, do you know your risks in Tacoma? Does anybody know any potential risks here? Besides these? No? I got all of them? Car accidents? Yep, car accidents. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah, train derailments. That's a good one. Anything else? All right, we'll get into it later. I have one more that you didn't think of. So natural disasters or natural risks. Obviously, we have the earthquakes. Everyone know Cascadia Rising or Cascadia Subduction Zone. So that's no longer an if it's going to happen, it's just a matter of time of when, right? We also have those floods, not too much within Tacoma or UW, but we have that Puyallup River. Puyallup gets a lot of flooding. You could get it on the water side too. There's potential for landslides, and as of recent, lots of fires. So I don't know if you've been aware of the past year, there was that Kodiak Enterprise fire down by the port. There was the Winthrop apartment fire here in downtown Tacoma that displaced over 100 people. There's some other fires that have been happening too that can jump over and affect you as well. So getting into the Cascadia subduction zone, we already know this. You know what to do when an earthquake happens? Anyone tell me what you do when an earthquake happens? Yeah. Where are you going to go when there's an earthquake in here? There's not that much, right? Whenever I get into a building and I sit down, I always look up and just see if there's anything above me that could potentially fall. You could get in door frames, right? That's why I like to position myself whenever I go into a room and sit down. I either sit next to an exit or somewhere that I could hide under. Again, I'm crazy now with all about emergencies. So here are some examples or ways to prepare for an earthquake. I love step 3, organize emergency supplies, because I have a whole lot of emergency supplies, right? But they're not really that organized. You could have plenty of emergency supplies, but if they're not organized, if you don't know where they are, for example, creating a to-go kit and you just shove all that stuff in, and then when that emergency actually happens and you need something and now you're just throwing everything out, it's not going to be as beneficial. So keep organized. Keep your plans organized, keep your equipment organized, keep your mind organized. Another thing as well is securing your space. So especially for your classrooms, are your shelvings bolted down? Where are those objects on your shelves? Is there heavier things up top? Maybe try to put those heavy things on the bottom shelving just in case. So just be more hyper aware of your surroundings, as well as make it more easygoing for you, or just make it more secure. So when that incident does happen, you're not saying, oh crap, I should have moved this. So I do know Susan, so UW is signed up for the Great Shakeout. I'm not too sure what you're going to be doing for the Great Shakeout, but please participate in it. October 19th at 10:19 a.m. Be prepared to go underneath a desk or wherever you can. Just be ready for that potential earthquake. If you make it as real as it can be, it's better off, right? So here's a map of all the flooding within Tacoma. It's mainly in the Tacoma port, but I highly recommend, if you do not live in Tacoma and you live in Puyallup or other places, look up those maps, look up if you are in a flood zone. It's always good to know. And if you have flood insurance, I recommend flood insurance if you do. Lahar zones, I love this map. I looked at this map when I first got this position and trying to find places to live. I looked at this. because I was like, okay, I'm not living in any of those areas that are highlighted. So yeah, so know your surroundings. I hope you can move fast. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, but does anybody know what a lahar is? Raise your hand. Yeah, if you don't know, it's basically just a massive mudslide coming from the volcano. It doesn't have to necessarily be a volcanic eruption that creates it. It could be multiple things that cause a huge mudslide. Yes. You are right on the other side of it, because that's really where it really hits the, let me go back to the flood. So it hits really there where it's the flooding. So that's the port. However, you might be affected by the lahar because if you have to travel up north, you're going to get blocked, right? Because I-5 is going to be down. And also, Port of Tacoma has a lot of hazardous materials in it. And then those potential hazardous materials might be airborne. So even though you're not being affected directly by the lahar, there could be some side effects that you can be affected by. Man-made risks. So here are those two that I did show. Another one also is hazardous materials, like Port of Tacoma. And so that railroad derailment, that's very difficult to say for some reason. You don't know what's on those trains, so it could be hazardous materials as well. So when there is a derailment, you got to think of that. Is that going to affect me? Is it going to be airborne? Is it going to go into the water systems? What do I need to look out for? And speaking of water systems, so terrorist attacks, it could be all different types of attacks, right? So it could affect UW's water system, contamination. It could be, since the wastewater treatment plant within Tacoma is all electrical and computerized, so it could be a cyber attack on the water systems. Other types of cyber attacks could affect UW, right? All personal information could be hacked. So you got to think of that, or even your personal documentation as professors. Do you have another location for all your secure documents? If you don't, maybe you should think twice about that, Just have multiple locations for certain things that you really need. Another type of attack could be bombings. It might not be directly in UW, but you are in Tacoma, downtown Tacoma, basically. So there's a lot of things that people might want to hit. And so think of those things. Active shooters, really, I can't teach you or train you on ways to protect yourself from active shooters, but I highly recommend taking an active shooter training from TPD or any other organization that does those trainings. I've taken some. I really do encourage you to do so. They give you plenty of examples of real life situations. And that kind of goes back to putting yourself in those scenarios, those hypothetical, those what if scenarios, and just do step by step on what you should do. I think of it all the time. For example, if there's an active shooter that pops out through this door, I'm punching him in the face. So, like those fast acting movements. And can you actually do them? I think the more repetition that you have on it, it's going to be easier for you to react instead of you in shock and going standstill. Some other things, and even your UW's website, I did look on that. So there's a lot of information on what to do when there is an active shooter. Even in this building, as I was walking through, there's little posters for emergency plans, which I thought that was really cool, for all different types of emergencies on what to do. Another thing, like I was saying, make a plan, make all different types of plans for any type of scenario. And then once you create that plan for a scenario, then start building a kit for it. So at-home kit, car, or a go bag. I'll dive a little bit more on what you should have in each of them. But first, making that plan. So reunification plan with your family members or friends, colleagues, classmates, or your students, you know? So create multiple reunification plans, find that staging area, or just find multiple locations too. If one area is not good, okay, now everyone knows this is the next staging area or location to meet up. Communications plans. So for this communication plan, have those contacts on a piece of paper or somewhere written down, because we are so reliable on our phones that we even forget how to do simple math, right? We're like dependent on that calculator. So I don't know about you, but I can't remember every single contact that is in my phone. So I write the important ones down. And then I also recommend you having a contact that is probably out of state. So if that huge Cascadia subduction zone earthquake happens, that's going to take out most of all of the West Coast. So maybe having a contact more inland saying, hey, this happened, this is what's going on. I might not be able to communicate with anyone else for a while because comms will most definitely be down. But you could always throw out maybe a voicemail to someone. A text message is great because it's less bandwidth. So again, having those different types of contacts is key. And going back to your family, is everyone on the same page of where to go, who to contact, and so forth? There's 2 websites up here that you could also put your information on. I haven't done it personally, so this could be some of your homework if you go on these websites and then see if you could actually put your information in it. And then develop that preparedness calendar. I have some pamphlets. I'll show you later. I have some pamphlets. It's the Prepare in a Year. I'm not too sure if any of you got one, but I love it. It's great. It shows you what you need in your preparedness kits, how to distill water, how to properly shelter in place, what to do for an earthquake, all different types of things, and a list of all the necessities and foods that you should have in your house. And so for that calendar, you know, it's pretty difficult and it can be pretty expensive in developing kits like this. So maybe once a month you purchase something or once a week. It all depends on how apocalyptic you want to get, but I'm pretty crazy. I'm like a doomsday prepper. So make that calendar, make it work for you, right? And if you have animals, make a plan for your animals, please. So if something does happen and you are displaced from your house and now you have to go into a shelter, not all shelters have equipment for your animals or cages for your animals. So make sure you have the necessities for them as well and enough water and food for them. And practice, practice, practice. Always practice, because these plans are always going to change. You can make a beautiful plan, it looks great, and then you try it and then nothing works. So you gotta like go through the plan again, adapt it, morph it, do whatever you can to make it as efficient as possible for you. Because if you think you could carry 100-pound pack for a long time, maybe some of you can, but it's really difficult. So emergency kit building. Now I'm going to give you a whole bunch of stuff that you could put in your kit. So at home kit, a lot of canned foods, dehydrated foods, high calorie foods. So those protein bars, those MREs. I don't really recommend an MRE unless you're desperate. If you ever had one, not the best. Water. So a gallon of water per person a day. And that is Yeah, some people drink a gallon of water a day, but really the gallon is for food purposes too, if your food needs water as well. And the personal information. This will reduce a lot of stress on you because if you don't have all your personal documents in one place and there's a fire and your house gets burnt down and now all those documentations are lost, that's a lot. That's very stressful. So having a second place for those, you could even put it on a decoded USB drive, put it in a plastic bag and then have it somewhere that you could just grab it and go. Or even have all your personal documents in maybe a suitcase. So now you know where the suitcase is. I have all my essentials in there and you could just get out if there was a fire. Because as of right now, fires are more occurring than an earthquake right now. So I see a lot of fires that is happening right now, and it was very sad, especially the Winthrop apartment fire. So I was duty officer when that happened, and just seeing all those people get displaced like that. Not many people in that were prepared. And so it was really horrible to see. So that's why I really make a point to be prepared having those kits because it can happen. I think we get really comfortable now, but I hope the pandemic kind of got you out of that because we didn't think a pandemic would happen, right? And it did. Some other things, candles, medications. If you have medications, make a medication plan. Does your medications need refrigeration? Do they need to be cooled? Can you get enough medication? If not, what's your backup plan? Another thing is the vehicle kit. So I have my to-go kit in my car, and I remember how I said it was like 100 pounds? Yeah, my kit was like 100 pounds. Okay, so I reduced it. It's like 40. So I did good, I think. I always say have different types of payments or like have cash, have credit card, different ways that you could pay for things because you never know, like ATMs could be down. So now cards are useless. And so now you need cash. So different methods of payments, emergency blankets. I love my emergency blankets because I'm always cold. Shovel, jumper cars, chains, all of that. And I know this is a little not off topic, but sometimes people don't really think about it. Weapons, things that you could protect yourself with, because I hate to say it, but in disasters, people, they might get a little crazy, right? They might get a little desperate. They want certain things, especially with that earthquake. People who are unprepared might want something that you want. We also live in Tacoma. So I also like to have that aspect in emergency preparedness. Always think of the worst, right? Which sounds horrible, but please do so. Here's some more examples for the grab and go kit, having that first aid kit, always updating that first aid kit because things get old. And that is also for food. I found in my car a 2015 protein bar and I was like, oh no, I got to update my food. So, I mean, you could eat it, won't be as enjoyable. So updating your kit supplies is good, having that rotation going on. Another way to prepare yourself for emergencies is definitely get involved in your community. Know your neighbor, know where you live, what type of infrastructure is around you. So in downtown Tacoma, there's a lot of old buildings. UW has old buildings. So if an earthquake does happen, what kind of building are you in? Is it going to collapse on you real quick, or is it going to be stable enough to withstand a certain earthquake? Those types of things. I really like knowing your neighbor. It's really interesting to me because I've lived in city life, rural life, suburban life, and it seems the more close you are, the the less knowing that you are with your people, right? Because I live I live in an apartment right now. I don't know my neighbors. They don't talk. Kind of interesting. But when I lived in the boonies, everyone knew each other. They could be a mile away and you will know your neighbor. Because out there, you're kind of on your own, right? But how I see it, if you're in a city life, you're on your own too. You're just closer to people. So just, getting to know who you are living with is great. I'm still trying to do that with my apartment, but I'm new here. So hopefully I don't seem too crazy. Some other things that you could do is sign up for your local emergencies. So I'll show you, we have Tacoma Alert, which is powered by Code Red. That's Tacoma's alert notification system. I send out alerts. So if you see one, just think of me. There's also PC Alert. So Pierce County has it. If you don't live in Tacoma, you could sign up through them. Also, Code Red is used by almost all the cities within Pierce County too. You could join some nonprofits or some organizations. So the American Red Cross or the Medical Reserve Corps or community emergency community emergency management. Oh my goodness. Community emergency response team. Sorry, I just combined both of my things together. So I'm the program manager for CERT, and I really enjoy CERT. CERT is where anyone can come and then learn about emergency preparedness and how to work in a team. You get a free backpack with a bunch of goodies inside too. And it's just really nice to get to know people who are retired first responders. Everyone brings their own knowledge into this program, and I just love it. And then you could even start your own program, your own emergency committee. I know some of the HOAs here within Tacoma, they have created emergency committees and groups within their neighborhoods. And like I said, knowing your neighbors, knowing the age range. So I did a presentation in an apartment complex that had people that are more elderly, that have more disabilities. And so I really encouraged them to know on each of the floors who might have a disability. So if Joanne on floor 9 is in a wheelchair, who's going to help her? Who's going to notify first responders that she's in that room and she can't get out because the elevators don't work? And so this is Tacoma Alert. If you have not registered, you could use that QR code to register. Again, this is the Community Emergency Response Team. It's not just within Tacoma. Some other jurisdictions also have teams. Puyallup has a team. West Pierce has a team. I think Bonnie Lake is creating a team, Renton. So there is multiple teams out there that you could potentially join, not just Tacoma. So you learn fire safety, light search and rescue, team organization, and the disaster medical operations. So we dive a little bit into triage. Also, if you do join and you take the course, I do a bunch of supplemental classes. And so stop the bleed, CPR first aid. This Saturday, I'm doing the 10 C's of survivability. So this 10 essentials that you need for long and short term operations. Here's some helpful links if you want to dig more in emergency preparedness. I really like ready.gov. They have a bunch of checklists of all different types of things, including animal pet plan. They have a lot of information of what you need and what you don't need. And does anyone have any questions?
And then if you have questions, I'll bring the microphone to you so that the people that are watching in Zoom, and we're also recording this to be on the web so that everybody can hear what you have to ask.
Don't be shy.
Hi, my name is Scott. Since the University of Washington Tacoma campus is a public space, I was curious if there has been any thought or planning about using the space to train community members, which of course then might make it super accessible to faculty, staff, and students as well. And you talked about the CERT training. That might be more extensive than what most people on the campus can commit to in a given quarter or year. But something like bringing CPR, I know like the Tacoma Fire Department does some training and stuff like that. Would we be able to host things like that here on this campus? And that might not be just a you question, that might also be you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Susan. I mean, I could definitely talk to the fire department. I know October 8th is CPR Sunday and they're doing at the Foss High School. Yes. So they have those. That could be a possibility, and I could definitely talk to some of the chiefs on that. But yeah, no, and even you could do so the American Red Cross, you could get Stop the Bleed come in too. So
Hi, thanks so much for this. I was wondering what resources are available for I don't know how to say, like more like classroom management stuff. One of the things I've noticed about all the resources, or most of the resources that I've gotten when I'm looked into stuff, is more about like sort of the individual, like being like, okay, how do you take care of your family? How do you take care of your pets? These kinds of things. And the drills that happened last year made me feel very clear that I don't totally know how to, I know I actually feel pretty clear about the individual, but like how to, what to do if I'm in the classroom and something happens, and how to think about like working with students, especially students whose needs I might not be as familiar with, disabled students. I mean, all kinds, there was a lot of things that came up as questions for me. So, yeah, so those kinds of things.
yeah, I could talk on it right now. You know, it's definitely making that plan, knowing how many students you have underneath your wing, you know, when an emergency does happen, some of the potential disabilities that some of your students have. And so figuring out kind of the logistics of it first, and then kind of develop like what you have right now and what you don't have. And so you could always create classroom kits. So I have some caches that I have for my CERT team, and that is a large first aid kit. You could have multiple emergency blankets. You could even have some rations of food within the classroom or water. So it really depends on what type of disaster you're thinking about. Are you thinking about a shelter in place? Are you thinking about you have to evac your whole classroom? Or yeah, so I would say, what kind of scenario are you thinking of? Or just the whole shebang?
Yeah, and so this is Sylvia. I can speak to that. And I know we talked a little bit when we came to your school retreat. The larger University of Washington umbrella is currently in the middle of putting out classroom management documentation. And so for faculty in this space, that is something that the university is looking at a tri-campus level to ensure that faculty know what they need to do, but also then that it's consistent, because many of our faculty travel between or teach at multiple campuses. We don't want it to be different from campus to campus. And so those are things that we will be seeing come out in this coming year. For anyone that didn't get an opportunity, Susan and I, between the two of us, came to 4 out of 7 school retreats. And so we have kind of been on the recent road show talking about training. And so this is our first training of this year. We plan on having a personal preparedness training at the beginning of every year to kind of have an iterative approach for people of a variety of of landscapes and walks to be able to start every year in a fresh, like, oh, these are the things I need to think about. And then for us to have the great earthquake shakeout and then to be building quarter by quarter, so that spring quarter, of course, is probably more around an active assailant kind of thing, but so that just like in the classroom, you're gaining a foundational level of knowledge and then building upon it throughout the year. So that's what will be coming in the rest of this year.
Yeah, and you could even create checklists too. So you have these checklists, handy. So if you do need to evacuate your classroom and you might not be able to get into your classroom again, what are some of the things that you should be taking out of that classroom? Personal documents, students, again, having that roster and having that location where your students should know where to meet up. So that could be a starting point of being prepared.
Hi, this is Mintha Hines-Wilson, the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, and absolutely appreciate that question about what to do in the classroom setting. And while work is being done, something that I would like to encourage everyone to think about is when you're in session, that very first class, have a conversation with your students. If something were to happen, this is going to be our agreement. Are we going to lock the doors? Are we going to shelter? Are we going to depart? Where is going to be our reunification space? So in my conversations with students during orientation, and also ASUWT is very fixated on safety this year. But the things that students have often said to me is, we have learned how to do active shooter training. We've been doing it since we were in kindergarten. So they're accustomed to trainings, some of them. Some of them are triggered because they've done them so often. So we're managing that. But the thing that stood out for me is when I'm in that classroom space, whomever the instructor is, I'm following their lead. So they're looking for us adult types to take on that responsibility. So I do think there's absolutely some work to be done. We'll be communicating that further. We just wanted to let you all know that in conversations during orientation, students have already intimated to me, well, what do we do when something happens? And is there someone there who can help us with this? And so one recommendation would be your first class, have that conversation and develop some shared agreements.
I would also say to know your building and what type of materials that are in your building. I know there's a science building, but if your classroom has some certain type of hazardous materials that might be interesting to certain individuals, just make a note of that. Yes.
Hi, my name's Steve Ross. I'm an associate dean here. I just want to build off of what Mentha offered here. I think that's critically important. But one of the things I've heard from faculty a lot over the past year is that they don't know that information. They don't know that. And so what I want to encourage us to do, I appreciate that the Tri-Campus is working on this and that something will be coming out this year. What I'm hearing from faculty is that we need something now, right? It can be a stopgap. It can be something that is just going to get us closer to, it doesn't have to, like, one of the things I get concerned about is having perfection be the enemy of the good, right? And we're trying to do it just right. We're trying to get it just right for everybody, that we don't take action to get us incrementally closer. And I'm going to have that conversation with my students because I feel comfortable in that space myself, but I know a lot of faculty are not comfortable. They don't know what that conversation should be, and they're struggling with that. And so I think having something very soon this quarter that gets us closer to would be extraordinarily beneficial to the vast majority of our faculty.
Any more questions, comments? All right. Well, if you do think of a question, you could always email me. I have lots to say about emergency preparedness. I just tried to not go overboard today. But, well, great. Thank you for all attend. Oh, yes. Yes.
I'm just mindful of the fact that we focus a lot on students and faculty, but staff too. same kind of dynamic when we're in our offices to be thinking about how are we going to prepare and what is going to be our response. And there's some of us that supervise students in this same situation. If I'm in an office and there are a group of students, they're going to be looking to me to figure out what to get done. So I think there's space here for everyone, and definitely heard that recommendation. And I do think collectively we can get to work on something and get it made available.
Yeah, the more prepared an individual is, the more prepared a whole community is, right? So the individual has to take their part into it as well. So if all of you are trained in emergency preparedness or is even thinking on it, I mean, that's one step to progress, right? And then you could always teach your students what they should be thinking about, recommend them to have those emergency preparedness kits, and basically what I showed you here today. So.
Hi, this is Julie Set. So that kind of just made me think of a question. Thinking about us as a campus community, are we as a campus preparing stockpiles of food and water and stuff like that for students and staff and faculty if we get stuck in this area? And are we located near a shelter, or like where's that information for the campus so people know where to go?
Oh, is this still on? It is good. So I can talk a little bit about that. When you talk about stockpiling, we're in the throes of coming back from COVID. And what I can say is, it's always about trying to find a balance, right? I've been at prior institutions and been involved in preparations at prior institutions who also, you have to remember they all have shelf lives and those things expire. So trying to find a balance and think about how many people you have on campus and what does that look like and what would be the basic needs. That's part of the reason I think we reached out to Tacoma to have them first come talk about that kind of personal emergency preparedness, because even having a bag in your car right now would go a long way to you being prepared if we got stuck on campus, right? And so I think that that's a huge starting point for people to think about. And then as we start to look at people coming back to campus more often and more frequently, what does that look like to prepare now that we're out of COVID and we can no longer keep gallons upon gallons upon gallons of hand sanitizer in places. So it's definitely something to be thinking about and then building upon. And this is really what this is the beginning, right, of dusting all those things off, seeing how COVID has changed, how have our patterns changed, and then what does that mean for the community? Susan, did you want to?
Yeah, so when it comes to the whole population, that would have to be for 5,000 people, right? And that could be a series of 3 days. The reality is if you prepare for at least 10%, which you usually do on universities, but for like a students in housing, there's supplies for that particular group, and that's because they live here on campus. So the big ask is for individuals, because you'll know your own dietary needs, right? Medication needs, having those kits as well. But if we had to pull our emergency reserves and foods on here, we do have plans, and I don't share it for security reasons, but we do have a cache if we had to, but also that's going to be limited to just water and a basic like food bar, and for folks with dietary needs. And we've gone through these plans for years. But also there's other things, other hazards. So it depends on the hazard, how long we have to stay. The reality is that it's going to be limited. The other part too is when it comes to shelters nearby, yes, we do have shelters nearby. I think it's about what's in walking distance, what's still a stand up. But we're now going through next month a kickoff meeting at the county level to have pre-areas stayed for shelters around. So if something happened at St. Joe's, they need to shelter in place. Could UW Tacoma, the Y, for instance, be an area there? Well, it has to have a certain criteria for it to fulfill a shelter, right? And that will help us for grants and other things, what we have to do infrastructure-wise. If something happened here where the university had to shift, could we go to our other universities and colleges like Bates Technical College, to UPS, PLU, if we needed some temporary, because they have generators. So it's those type of plans that we're going as a region so we could support each other. And then what can we then put out? So that's all like what's here. As Sylvia said, this is those steps of coming back, seeing where our gaps are. I agree with everyone here about us doing what we're doing interim. We do have plans like in labs, for instance, that have hazmat. We have specific criteria there. Some of the deficits are in non-labs, right? What do you do if there's an emergency? So creating those guides, but they're only going to be as good as if they really are applicable to the audience that it's targeted towards. So I think those are all those steps we need to take.
And I think really it's that slide about practice, 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 right? We need to get back in the habit of practicing these things in the classroom, in our working environments with our staff, when we're out in the open with our students. And so this is a really good first step. I'm so excited to see so many people here. Because really here at UW Tacoma, we run the full length of how people feel about being prepared, right? All the way from the how dare you even talk about it, because that is not something that we do in the workplace. That's not my job. We don't do that. All the way to the far other end of the spectrum, which is like we should all have personal bug out bags under our desk and should be doing that work. And so it's really about coming together as a community like this is doing today to get back in the habit to talk how we can be our own advocate, but also advocating out amongst our colleagues and our team members and really participating in the kind of discourse that we need to move ourselves together, right? In that step of perfection, to not let that be something that's a barrier so we can all work together to move forward.
Also, a little insight in emergency management. So we make plans, right? We're always planning on something. But whenever something happens, that plan that we created doesn't work. So because not everything is the same, every incident has something slightly different that you just have to figure out on the fly. So having a plan A, plan B, all the way to a plan Z is beneficial. And really from like how I learn incidences is just, again, knowing your community, knowing what the resources you have around you. That is essential for anything. You could have a basic plan, but if you don't know your resources, you're going to get stumped and that's going to stress you out. So maybe creating a list, getting into logistics, having a list of all the potential resources that you might need for UW, and going back to those shelters, there's a lot of potential shelters in Tacoma as well as overall Pierce County. But again, it goes back to it's situational. Each disaster is different. So one shelter that you see might be beautiful to like put people in, but now that earthquake has collapsed that shelter and now you need to find another shelter. So when we do these plans, when something does happen, it's kind of easier for us because I'm like, okay, we have like 100 shelters on a map. This one's not good. This one's not good. Let's go over to this one. So that's kind of how we move in emergency management.
All right. Well, thank you all. You will be, and thank you. Thank you to Ariana for coming and spending her time with us today. Please be on the lookout from your emails. We do have, as she mentioned, we will be participating in the Great Earthquake Shakeout. So you will start getting materials after today about how we can prepare for that. What does that look like in every building, and what kind of work will be undertaken there. So have a great day.
Thank you.